After my grandma passed away, I headed back to Chicago from my rural hometown to sort things out and get ready for my wedding. Just as I reached the wedding planning firm, all set to book a mega lavish ceremony, the staff informed me that the groom was already hitched. Jason, the eldest son of the Lincoln Group, had tied the knot 3 months prior with Lily, the daughter of Washington, D.C.'s mayor, who'd been his girl since they were kids. I found myself standing in front of Jason's mansion, scowling. But I'm Anna, the mayor's daughter from the capital. The house's butler didn't even let me through the door. Mr. Jason said, "Who's bold enough to fake my wife? My wife grew up with me since we were kids. How could I confuse her?" Cousin Sarah was furious, tears welling up in her eyes, asking, "Cousin, what's happening? Why are you saying someone's impersonating her? We weren't supposed to be engaged to Jason since childhood. Weren't we here to set up our wedding this time?" I hushed her, keeping quiet. This visit back to Chicago was to prep for the wedding. Originally, I was to wait for my parents to come together, but they were swamped with work, so I came first, planning to handle the wedding stuff myself. There were tons of tangled issues to deal with, so I wanted to get things in order. As soon as I stepped into the wedding planning company, I had just wrapped up brainstorming with the lead designer when she glanced at the picture of my fiancé on my phone, and her face changed in a split second. "Miss Anna, isn't this Jason's guy?" "Yeah, that's my fiancé." The designer's face soured, frowning, as she responded, "But Mr. Jason got hitched 3 months ago, and our company organized that wedding." Ever since Grandma got sick, I took over my parents' roles, returned to my hometown as the dutiful granddaughter, and hadn't been back to Chicago for 5 years. It was only after her passing that my mom called me back, pushing me to get everything set up properly since the engagement was arranged since we were kids. If we kept delaying, we'd both be nearing 30. After uncovering the truth, I rushed to Jason's house to confront him, not expecting to see this mess. Jason's family's arrogance and his dismissive glare made me roll my eyes. Can't they see their mistake? Better believe I'm not the one they're looking for. I took my cousin Sarah to hit up all the upscale shops in Chicago and sent all the receipts to Jason's place. After all, the person who signed the bills is Lily, the mayor's daughter. It wasn't even noon yet, and Jason's company was packed. Reps from various luxury brands in Chicago were there to drop off goods and settle payments. "Mr. Jason, this is in your wife's name. You can't skip out on this." "Of course, everyone knows your wife's name. Who dare to fake her?" Mr. Jason replied, "Your wife spent a total of $1 million at our store. Time to pay up." "Mr. Jason, if you're short on cash, why not ask your wife to swing by next month to shop? First, return that black pearl necklace. Someone else is waiting. It's worth $600K. Right, if you're broke, then why let your wife go on shopping sprees? What's the point of buying if you can't pay? We'll have her sign first to take it, thinking Mr. Jason, you're a big shot in Chicago, won't back down." I sat in a coffee shop watching the chaos, seeing Jason from afar with a bit of sweat on his brow, frowning at the crowd at the entrance. I sipped my coffee, grinning a little. Didn't I marry Anna? Then I should handle everything that comes with that name. A woman walked out from inside the company, dressed all up. It was none other than Jason's wife, the lady the servants talked about in Jason's household. She looked at the bills held by the staff from different brands, shook her head and said, "These aren't my signatures. Someone's faking me." The brand rep said, "If you say it's not your signature, then it isn't your signature?" She confidently replied, "I grew up abroad since I was young. I can read Chinese but not write it. This handwriting isn't mine." Jason wanted to stop her, but it was too late. He looked at the crowd causing a scene. The dignified mayor's daughter can't write in Chinese? Not long ago, there were rumors she wrote calligraphy for a charity gala auction. How could she not know how to write? Mrs. Jason can really say anything to dodge paying her debts. Jason explained, "My wife misunderstood. In her hurry to explain, it's just that she hurt her hand recently and can't write. She's been doing it since childhood with beautiful, delicate calligraphy. How could she not know how to write? Then let Mrs. Jason write her name, and everyone can see if it matches the signature on the bill." I stepped forward from the crowd, smiling at him. "Isn't that what Mr. Jason said?" "Wouldn't that make it obvious? Everyone would believe it." The mayor's wife of Chicago is a top calligrapher, and Mrs. Anna comes from a scholarly family. Their daughter could write at 3, winning national calligraphy awards at 5. Who doesn't know this? Everyone nodded. Yes, let Mrs. Jason write her name. We can all see. Jason glared at me fiercely. Who are you? What's this got to do with you? This is a family matter? I stepped back. I'm just speaking fairly for everyone. Why can't I say a fair word? Mrs. Jason hid behind Jason and said, Honey, I can't write. After hesitating, she recalled Jason's words. I hurt my right hand and can't write. I smiled. Miss Anna has practiced calligraphy with both hands since she was young. Even with her right hand injured, she can still write with her left. Mrs. Jason, don't be shy. Everyone will recognize her characters written with her left hand. Right, you can't have injured both hands, can you? I saw you come out just now holding something. Everyone burst into laughter. Mrs. Jason's eyes sparkled with tears, and I stepped forward. Sarah, bring the pen and paper, please. Mrs. Jason, I once bid on a small piece of Anna's writing at an auction. This is Mrs. Jason's handwriting. Don't mistake it later. I took out a piece of writing from my bag, something I'd written in the coffee shop, and it was exactly what I needed. The handwriting matched the sales invoices perfectly, the calligraphy was passed around, and everyone stared at Mrs. Jason. Mrs. Jason, let's begin. Jason's face darkened as he confronted me. Who are you? Do you even know where this is to be causing trouble? This is none of your business, just leave. Sarah stepped in front and shouted, What are you doing, Jason? My cousin is just standing up for fairness, and now Mr. Jason is making things hard for her to dodge paying. Is there any justice left in the world? Any laws left? Everyone rushed forward, blocking me. That's right, pay up. Looking for an excuse to skip out? We'll see you in court. Mrs. Jason shouted loudly. Stop the noise. I'll just write it. The staff took out paper and pen, and she awkwardly wrote the name Anna. It was really bad. Everyone looked at her writing, then at the characters on the document, confused. Is this one person's handwriting? I scoffed. Mrs. Jason will do anything to dodge her debts. Who is she trying to scare with this? Unless Mrs. Jason isn't Anna, then who is Mrs. Jason? Mrs. Jason looked shocked, stepping back a few paces and exclaimed, Nonsense. I'm not Anna. Who are you? I'm the mayor's daughter of the capital, Mrs. Jason. Who do you think you are, showing up at the Lincoln Group's entrance spouting nonsense? Someone throw her out. Don't let her dirty my family's reputation. The security guards charged out like wolves and tigers, ready to kick me out. Sarah stood in front of me and was violently pushed down by someone. Jason shouted angrily from the side, bringing people to the company to cause trouble for no reason. I want to see what your intentions are. Mrs. Jason rushed over with the security guard, yanked off my mask, and upon seeing my face, a flicker of jealousy flashed in her eyes. Sarah was grabbed by several security guards and shouted, Let go of my cousin. Do you know who my cousin is? When my uncle arrives in Chicago, you won't get away with this. Mrs. Jason slapped Sarah across the face. You little brat, how dare you speak in front of me? I wanted to protect Sarah, but someone stopped me. Anger surged within me. Mrs. Jason, hasn't your family always been low-key and humble? Miss Anna is well-educated and reasonable, yet turns out she's unreasonable and quick to resort to violence. Mrs. Jason had a hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth, mixed with pride. I'm Mrs. Jason. And who are you? When the time comes, I'll have a good talk with your parents about how they raised you and whether you have any manners at all. I'm going to teach you a good lesson on behalf of your parents right now. After saying that, she stepped forward. I tried to dodge, but the security guard held me back from behind. The next second, a slap landed hard on my face. My face immediately swelled up. From childhood till now, my parents never dared lay a finger on me. Yet I was hit by this imposter? Sarah's eyes turned red with anger. Mrs. Jason, do you know who you just hit? You'll have to pay the price. She stepped forward forcefully and whispered, The price? You talk a big game, but if I were to cut your mouth open now, what could you do to me? I quickly dodged and shouted, You're a fake Anna. I'm the real Anna, and I'm calling the cops now. The crowd was in uproar. Jason was originally just a bystander, but upon hearing my words, his expression changed. He grabbed Mrs. Jason, and I quickly broke free from the security guard's grip and took a few steps back. Mr. Jason, you're engaged to Anna, yet 3 months ago, you married this lady and recognized her as Anna. I ask you, when you got your marriage certificate, was the name written as Anna? Jason's face turned pale. and he took a step back. Mrs. Jason stepped forward to block the way. I grew up with my husband since we were kids. What's this got to do with you? I let out a cold laugh, took out my ID card, which not only had my photo, but, most importantly, clearly displayed the name Anna. I want to find a lawyer to sue you for impersonation, using my identity to gain fame and marry into a wealthy family. The onlookers were stunned. No wonder Mrs. Jason's handwriting is so bad. I used to think as long as someone's American, how could they not know how to write? And when they married, it seemed no one came from Anna's family, which felt strange at the time. The wedding was quite basic back then. I heard only a few friends were invited. I was puzzled then, wondering how the son of the richest man could have such a low-key wedding. Mrs. Jason wiped her tears with a silk scarf, her eyes full of sorrow. We got married, and I didn't want to be too high profile to protect my father's reputation. I never expected I'd become the target of your criticism. Anyway, no matter what I say, you won't believe me. You only trust this strange woman's words. Or are you actually in love with my husband, wanting to ruin my reputation and leave me with nothing? Miss, do you know how important reputation is for a woman? Now, no one will believe anything I say. Seems the only way to prove my innocence is through death. With that, she dashed towards the glass door, and everyone nearby gasped in shock. Wife, what are you doing? Why would you do something so crazy for a stranger who just showed up out of nowhere? Jason hugged her tightly, and Mrs. Jason leaned into his embrace, crying uncontrollably. Jason's eyes widened with anger as he shouted, "Someone! Capture this woman who spreads rumors and tarnishes Anna's reputation. I want to see just how bold she is." Sarah fought desperately to break free from the security guard's hold, standing firmly in front of me. She was struck down by two burly guards, while another pinned her to the ground, slapping her face again and again. "Where did this crazy woman come from? How dare you cause a scene here?" The other two security guards were coming over to grab me. I took out a pen and pressed it against my neck. "Whoever dares to touch me, I'm the real Anna. If anything happens to me today, my dad will be back in 3 days, and he won't let you off." The security guard wanted to step forward and grab me, but seeing the dagger in my hand and fearing it might lead to a fatal incident, he only turned back to gauge Jason's expression before acting. Jason's face turned pale with anger. "If I don't teach you a lesson today, others will think I'm easy to bully. Aren't you ruining my wife's reputation? What are you waiting for? Capture her for me. If anything happens, I will take full responsibility." A few people rushed forward and grabbed me. A fountain pen sliced across my neck and blood began to flow. The security guard grabbed my hand and scolded, "You little girl dare to be so reckless here." With a thud, the pen in my hand fell to the ground, and my hand nearly got twisted off by their brute force. I struggled hard. "Jason, if you dare touch a hair on my head, my dad will definitely not let you off when he comes to Chicago. I'm not slandering her. She impersonated me." Jason's lips curled with a hint of malice. "Then we'll see if your father can save you in time. Give her a few slaps, hit her hard, and see if she dares to spread rumors and cause trouble again." That's too much. How can you slap someone in public like that? Quickly record it and post it online for everyone to see how Mr. Jason is disregarding the law. What are you standing there for? Call the cops. This little girl looks delicate and frail. She's in for some suffering now. I struggled desperately to break free, but it was no use, as I was firmly held by two security guards. "Hit me! Slap, slap!" Several blows landed on my face, and my cheeks immediately swelled and turned red. Sarah shouted with a pale face, "Don't hit my cousin!" I was silenced, unable to utter any complete words, just woo-woo. Jason stared at me intensely. "I have to teach you a lesson today. Hit me." Two security guards raised their hands, ready to strike my face. As I gritted my teeth, preparing to endure the blow, a commanding voice suddenly echoed from a distance. "Stop! Let's see who dares to touch my daughter!" I turned around, and tears fell instantly. "Dad?" Finally, my parents arrived in Chicago, and the bodyguard beside them hurriedly stepped forward to push away the person holding on to me. I immediately threw myself into my mother's arms, sobbing silently. She looked at my face, filled with heartache, and asked, "Who hit you?" My father was still in his meeting suit, followed by bodyguards and some officials from Chicago, while the people around quickly stepped aside to make way. My dad walked up to Jason and said in a deep voice, Mr. Jason is truly impressive. In front of the public, telling citizens to hit when he says hit and to scold when he says scold. Jason was drenched in cold sweat, feeling a bit weak in the knees under my father's pressure. My father's gaze was piercing as he looked past him and focused on the lady behind her. I heard, Mr. Jason got married 3 months ago and married my daughter? I had no idea I actually have a daughter, lost out in the world. The crowd gathered to watch the excitement, unafraid of the trouble, and began to jeer from the sidelines. Mr. William, the one hiding behind Mr. Jason, that's his wife. And they say she's your daughter. Mom stepped forward and pointed at Mrs. Jason behind her. Mrs. Jason, may I ask you a couple of questions? You say you are Anna, the mayor's daughter of the capital city. Why, now that your parents are here, you don't step forward? The onlookers impersonating the mayor's daughter to commit fraud? And for several million, that's quite a serious crime, isn't it? This Jason is really too bold. How can there still be people impersonating others to get married these days? It's simply outrageous. Mrs. Jason's legs trembled like a sieve. Mr. William, Miss Anna, my mom pressed on relentlessly. Mrs. Jason, are you saying you are Anna, or are you saying you are someone's illegitimate daughter who has been hiding this from me? After saying that, she shot a glare at Dad. As soon as Dad heard this, his face darkened instantly. He walked over to Mom, pointed at Mrs. Jason, and shouted, "This is outrageous. My reputation is being tarnished by a petty person like you. I'm going to call the cops, have you arrested, and find out what's going on." Jason and Mrs. Jason were already pale. Mr. William, it's a misunderstanding. It's absolutely a misunderstanding. Dad snorted coldly, misunderstanding? I only arrived in Chicago a step late, and my daughter has been bullied like this. I don't even know what kind of misunderstanding this is. I let out a cold snort. Who in Chicago doesn't know that Mr. Jason married the mayor's daughter, Anna? I'm just an innocent girl, and without any reason, I'd become a married woman. I wasn't even in Chicago, yet my reputation has been nearly ruined. Mrs. Jason knelt on the ground, huddled behind Jason, crying softly, "Honey boo-hoo, I don't want to go to the police station. What should we do now? It's not my fault." Dad was furious. My daughter, William, is being slandered like this. Jason, since you dared to do it, do you not dare to take responsibility for it? As soon as Jason heard this, he no longer cared about anything else and pushed Mrs. Jason aside. Mrs. Jason bumped into the glass door with a "oh dear." Mr. William, no, Uncle William. I was also deceived by her. I was also kept in the dark. Jason was only busy admitting his mistake. Uncle William, I was also deceived. I really didn't know. She came to my door with her ID saying she had a fight with her family and had nowhere to go. I was young and naive, and seeing how real the documents looked, I believed her. She clearly explained the reasons and consequences of the engagement, so I kept my promise, acknowledged this marriage, and married her. I blushed and spat, "How shameless!" And married her. I blushed and spat, "How shameless!" Who gets married like that, just taking an ID card? What about the household registration book? Is this something that can be recognized just by forging a document? Jason looked at me, presenting what he thought was his best side, his eyes filled with deep affection. "I've always been thinking about your daughter. When she came to me, crying pitifully, I couldn't help but think of Miss Anna. How could I dare to doubt anything? Please forgive me this time, Miss Anna." I felt so nauseous that I almost threw up the leftover food from last night. Mrs. Jason heard him say this, got up from the ground, and cried out as she rushed over. Mrs. Jason heard him say this, got up from the ground, and cried out as she rushed over. "Husband, what are you saying? How can you say that I deceived you?" Jason stood to the side, looking at his father, his face full of guilt and resentment. "Uncle William, you have to believe me. This is not what my family intended. This wretched woman is nothing but a gold digger. She has deceived our family terribly. We must capture her and teach her a good lesson." Mrs. Jason still didn't realize the seriousness of the situation, crying and acting coy. "Honey, what are you talking about? Do you want to divorce me and marry Miss Anna?" Jason shook her off. "The one who was engaged to me is Miss Anna. You're an imposter. You're not Anna, so that engagement, naturally, doesn't count." Mrs. Jason tugged at his sleeve and shook it, saying, "Honey, you said you would treat Clara well for a lifetime. Have you forgotten what you promised?" Jason slapped her face with a backhand. "Shameless! When did I ever say any of this to you?" Clara sat on the ground, not understanding how everything had changed so suddenly. It was clearly her husband who had brought her into this, with a romantic proposal and an exquisite wedding, and now it seemed none of it counted. She watched as her beautiful dream fell apart. Dad waved his hand. "Come here. Take everyone to the police station. I must find out who dares to impersonate my daughter and even pretend to marry her." The bodyguards rushed forward, and Clara was taken away by them. Jason stood by, only looking at his father. "Dad, it was all my fault for being deceived by that woman and hastily getting married. I owe it to Anna." Sarah spat. "I still remember how you and that woman bullied my cousin just now." "What, Dad? What, Anna, sister? Who do you think you are to be worthy of that? Don't drag my cousin into this." My mother took my hand, raised her head to look at him, and said, "What a good Jason you are. With such family values and upbringing, you're truly unworthy of my daughter. Let's cancel this marriage." "I've already called your mother. It's all because she's far away abroad and doesn't pay attention to worldly matters that such a ridiculous situation has arisen. When she returns, I will naturally have something to say to her." Jason said in a panic, "Auntie, it's all my fault. I let you down. Please give me another chance. I will treat me well." Dad looked at him coldly, his face full of disdain. "There's no need for that, Mr. Jason. Don't bring up this marriage proposal again. You, a man who already has a wife, still want to climb up to my daughter? Bah!" This farce, grand in scale, spread across the internet in just half a day, as news of the eldest son of the Lincoln family, Jason, marrying a fake daughter of the mayor of the capital city circulated. Although the trending searches with our family name can't even make it to the top and there's no entry for this person, the forums are basically all discussing this matter. I am temporarily staying with my parents in our home in Chicago. The next morning, I saw a commotion in the yard. Jason's mother, who had just returned from abroad, was bringing a grand array of gifts and ushering Jason into our home. When I came down from the stairs, I happened to see Jason kneeling in the middle of the living room on the first floor. Jason's mother had a stern expression as she scolded him. "I've taught you since you were young to be sensible and know when to advance and retreat. I never expected you would do something like this, secretly bringing home a fake daughter-in-law. Our family's reputation has been completely tarnished by you. I have no complaints about how the Anna family deals with you. I only blame myself for not being strict enough, allowing you to make such a mistake. Since your father's death, I have been recuperating abroad and never concerned myself with your affairs, thinking you had made something of yourself. I never expected you to develop such twisted thoughts. I feel ashamed towards your family, ashamed towards your father. You should kneel here and reflect on your mistakes." Jason's mother has never been in good health. Seeing her so angry, I quickly stepped forward to greet her. "Hello, Auntie. I could never marry someone like Jason. Please take charge and cancel this marriage." Mom wiped her tears. "Sister doesn't know how much Lily has suffered. When she returned to Chicago, the first thing she did was go to the wedding company to arrange the wedding. But she was struck by this news like a bolt from the blue. Now it's become common knowledge. How can Lily live with this?" Jason's mother handed over a box. Inside was a share transfer document. This was originally a gift I prepared for Lily, but now it will serve as her dowry for the future. She will be like my own daughter. Jason's expression changed immediately upon hearing this, and he stepped forward, saying, "Mom, this marriage was arranged while Dad was still alive. How can it be easily annulled?" Jason's mother scolded him loudly. "How can you do something like this and still have the nerve to mention your father? I haven't even asked you what happened with that Clara." Jason mumbled, "I don't need him to say it. I've already had someone look at Clara's testimony." Dad just came back from a meeting, still dressed in formal attire. It turned out that Clara was a classmate he had met abroad, and their relationship had been somewhat flirtatious. However, a year ago, she suddenly returned to the country, claiming that she had fallen into high-interest debt and was being targeted by gangsters. With no way out, she had turned to Jason for help. Two people secretly began living as a couple in a mansion until 3 months ago when Clara's belly grew, and she insisted that Jason give her a title. It was then that he came up with a terrible idea and organized a fake wedding. Clara cried and threw a tantrum, saying that if Jason didn't marry her, she would go live and accuse him of abandoning her after starting it all. Although Jason was engaged, he was used to being a rogue and thought that not getting a marriage certificate or holding a wedding didn't mean much. It was just right to use the title of a childhood betrothal, claiming that he had married Miss Anna, and he wouldn't be criticized behind his back. It's hard to say. Once the rice is cooked, perhaps the Anna family, considering the friendship of our parents, would be willing to accept Clara as their goddaughter. He attended several charity galas with Clara and had someone write a few calligraphic pieces, creating an aura around the talented woman, which made others hesitant to doubt them. Thus, the two naturally got married, and outsiders only knew that Miss Anna returned to Chicago alone, chose the wedding date, and got married. Jason, taking advantage of his status as the son-in-law of the mayor of the capital, reaped many benefits. His life went smoothly, and naturally, he forgot that paper cannot contain fire. Unexpectedly, Dad suddenly came to Chicago for an inspection. I returned to Chicago early and accidentally interrupted his good fortune, shattering his beautiful dream. Under the thunderous measures of both families, the engagement between my family and Jason's was dissolved. Jason's mother looked at Jason with disappointment. "That Clara, who knows where she came from, what do you plan to do about her? You've already brought shame to our family, and our daughter-in-law absolutely cannot be someone like her. Outwardly say that she is just a distant cousin of yours, here to visit relatives, and arrange for her to have a separate small apartment to live in." This scandal has caused such a stir that the stock price of the Lincoln Group has fluctuated for several days, leading shareholders to express their dissatisfaction with him, suggesting that if he cannot calm the storm, someone else should take the helm. Jason's mother stepped in and spoke with several old shareholders a few times before she could barely stabilize the situation. Because Jason's family was so embarrassed, the powerful circles in Chicago quickly distanced themselves as soon as they sensed the wind changing. Clara was released. She was originally supposed to be sentenced, but Jason had someone intervene for her, and she was ultimately acquitted. But after Clara returned to the Lincoln family, she refused to calm down, crying, causing a scene, and even threatening to hang herself, demanding that Jason hold a proper wedding and marry her again. Jason's mother said that for the sake of the child, she could be settled with the child. But if she wanted to marry into the Lincoln family, it would be over her dead body. Clara watched as her identity transformed from Mrs. Jason to a clandestine lover. Unwilling to accept it, she clung to Jason at his home every day, crying and causing a scene. She clutched her stomach and cried in front of Jason, "I was brought into your life as your wife. How can you not acknowledge me?" "I don't care. You need to go with me to get the marriage certificate right now, or I will go live and expose all your dirty secrets." You think I serve you well, and having heard that Anna has a strong personality and is difficult to get along with, you start to have ulterior motives. You don't want to give up this home, yet you also don't want to marry William's daughter. You want it all, treating others like fools to be manipulated, thinking that all the benefits in the world should belong to your family alone. The glory is all yours, and when something goes wrong, you want me to take the blame? Jason, you think too highly of yourself. At this moment, Jason had other ideas. Every day, he had someone send things to my house: expensive flowers, designer clothes, luxury jewelry, an array of treasures delivered to us day after day, until Sarah saw Jason come back angrily, slamming the table and fuming. Jason's family is really shameless. That Jason sends gifts to my cousin every day and hints on social media that he and my cousin are childhood sweethearts, all because that Clara deceived him. He knows he was wrong and wants to rekindle his relationship with my cousin and throw a wedding of the century. The gossip-loving crowd praised him as a man of temperament. Biffed, shameless. I had everything loaded onto a truck and sent to Jason's house, handed over to Jason's mother, and conveyed the message. Since the engagement has been canceled, the two families need not have any further dealings from now on. Clara looked at these things, her eyes red with jealousy. On that day, Clara, with her big belly, blocked me at my usual restaurant. She looked at me with red eyes and said, "I asked Miss Anna to give me a way out." Jason said, "This matter started with me, and if I can't get Miss Anna's forgiveness, I will no longer be allowed to enter the Lincoln family's door." I took a step back, interrupting her words. Mrs. Jason, you should be careful with your words. Jason and I have already broken off our engagement. We have no relationship. What do you want from me? Tears fell from her eyes. Jason said the person he has always liked is Miss Anna, and it's all because I deceived him with a fake ID. If Miss Anna doesn't forgive him and is unwilling to marry him, I will kneel here forever. With a thud, she knelt before me. Sarah stood in front of me. Mrs. Jason, do you have no shame? You impersonated my cousin and married Jason, and now you're forcing my cousin to marry Jason. You have no shame, but others still have some. Do you think kneeling here can threaten my cousin? I no longer paid her any attention and turned to leave the private room. Just as I went downstairs, I heard Clara crying behind me. Miss Anna, can't you, for Jason's deep feelings for you, forgive him just this once? No one is perfect. Who can be without faults? Her words drew the attention of everyone in the corridor, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment. Sarah retorted sharply, Mrs. Jason, the engagement between the Anna family and the Lincoln family was canceled long ago. You're pregnant and should be thinking about marrying into a wealthy family to give your child a name. Why are you here slandering my cousin? Is this your son Jason's idea? If he can't marry my cousin, will he just harass her for a lifetime? My face was pale, my voice choked with tears. How can there be such a shameless person like Jason in this world? Not only did he ruin my reputation, but he also wants me to suffer for the rest of my life. Then I leaned to one side, pretending to fall onto Sarah. Sarah screamed, hurry and call 911. My cousin is having a heart attack from anger. Suddenly, the news that Jason sent someone to the hotel to force William's young lady into marriage, causing her to faint from anger, spread throughout the elite circles of Chicago. Dad went directly to the Lincoln Group, regardless of their shareholders' meeting, and in front of all the shareholders, he laid out my grievances one by one, slamming the table and telling Jason that from now on, the two families would have no further relations. I heard that Jason's mother spent the night gathering photos of the prominent young ladies from Chicago to discuss arranging a blind date for Jason. 2 months later, Jason's family arranged a marriage with the daughter of another clan. Miss Lee was very beautiful, and more importantly, she had a fiery temperament. In front of her, Clara could only lower her head and play the role of the submissive. The next time I saw Clara and Jason was at a mall I often visit. Jason accompanied her to go shopping for clothes, presumably because Miss Smith had not yet entered, leaving Clara, this little lover, unattended. Clara leaned weakly against Jason, playfully asking to buy the bag across the street. When she saw me walk in, she raised an eyebrow and smiled, saying, "Oh, it's Miss Anna." Wow, Miss Anna will be hitting 30 in a few years, right? I heard you still haven't found a boyfriend. Do you regret your decision back then? Unfortunately, Jason is engaged. Miss Anna won't be able to enter the Lincoln family anymore. She'll only be able to be a mistress. Oh dear, won't that make me have to call her sister? I looked at her coldly. Clara, you should know that as long as I don't show you mercy, your crime of impersonating me can still land you in prison for a long time. Clara's face turned pale, and she hurriedly closed her mouth. I took Sarah to the clothing store across the street and happened to run into Miss Lee, who was trying on clothes inside. I smiled, gently sat down, pretended not to know her, and only spoke to Sarah. Running into Jason while shopping for clothes is just bad luck. That Clara is really too arrogant. Jason likes her so much, I truly worry for his future wife. Too arrogant. Jason likes her so much. I truly worry for his future wife. It's really pitiful after all. Who can tolerate their husband keeping a mistress outside? There's still a child in the belly. I wonder how much trouble that will cause. Miss Lee stood rigidly upon hearing my words, hoping that what I said would make her reconsider the marriage. I picked out a dress for Sarah, paid for it, and turned to go to another store. Before we had gone far, we saw Miss Lee rush into the luxury goods store across the street. In a moment, a few people came out, grappling with each other. Miss Lee pointed at Clara and ordered the bodyguard to go over and take her. Break this vixen's mouth for me and teach her a good lesson. I am the future, Mrs. Jason, and how dare she speak so impudently? Call me, let's see if she still dares to be arrogant. Clara screamed, covering her face and hiding everywhere. Miss Lee, you haven't married into the Jason family yet. How can you hit people recklessly? You, a young lady of a wealthy family, are always shouting about fighting and killing. Do you know that Jason hates rude women like you the most? I'm carrying Jason's firstborn. How dare you touch me? Miss Lee's eyes turned red with anger upon hearing this. With a glance, several bodyguards immediately surrounded her. Amidst the chaos, Clara screamed, "Husband, help! My stomach, my baby, help!" Jason wanted to intervene but couldn't find a way to do so. By the time the people from Jason's family pulled them apart, Clara was already lying on the ground, her face pale, clutching her stomach and crying out in pain. Clara's nanny let out a sharp scream. "Ah, there's blood on the floor!" Everyone was stunned, and Jason quickly picked up Clara. "Let's go to the hospital." Clara had a miscarriage because she was pushed and bumped in the abdomen. The child could not be saved. Clara broke down, crying her heart out at home. The Lee family knew they were in the wrong, but their daughter hadn't yet married into the Jason family, and it was unacceptable for Jason's mistress to have a child first. The Lee family brought over a collaboration proposal to apologize to the Jason family. Jason's family could only consider it so-so. After all, it's already quite good that Jason can still marry into a family of equal status. Although Miss Lee is somewhat spoiled and unruly, she has the Lee family backing her. Would they really cancel the marriage for a mere lover? In the end, Jason could only let Clara bite the bullet and swallow her pride. After all, who told her to be in such an unjust position? Miss Lee knew that Clara was still living at Jason's house, and in her pride, she smashed things all over the house. Upon hearing this news, I was overjoyed. Ivy, the eldest daughter of the Lee family, known for being difficult to deal with, how could she possibly be happy that Jason has a mistress? There would surely be a good show to watch in the future. On Jason's wedding day, just after accompanying Ivy into the bridal chamber, someone came knocking at the door. "Young master, Miss Clara says her stomach hurts and wants you to come take a look. She's in a lot of pain and has been crying." As soon as Jason heard that, he released Ivy, who was nestled in his arms without saying a word, and rushed straight to Clara's room, leaving Ivy in the bedroom with a dark expression on her face. Ivy gritted her teeth and called out to the nanny beside her. "Is Clara still living in this house?" The nanny stammered and couldn't explain the reason. She had someone guide her to Clara's residence. As soon as you enter the small villa in the backyard, you can hear a burst of delicate laughter from inside. "Hubby can only touch me. Clara still has to give hubby a whole football team, and before I get pregnant, you're not allowed to touch that woman. You are not allowed to share a room with her. You are not allowed to look at her anyway. For these few days, you can only be with me." The light reflected the shadows of people on the window, showing Clara, already dressed in sexy lingerie, sitting on Jason's lap and acting coy. Jason coaxed her. "All right, my sweetheart, I only cherish you." That Ivy, who in Chicago doesn't know she has never been able to get married. It's already quite good for her to marry into the Lincoln family, and she still dares to say anything about me. "My child, can you just come out from your belly, okay?" The two of them became entangled in a loving embrace in the room. Clara said with a playful smile, "My husband promised at that time that if I gave birth to a son, he would divorce Ivy and marry me." Jason smiled. "Of course." Ivy's eyes turned red with anger as she shouted, "Break down the door for me!" A few bodyguards rushed forward and kicked the door open. In the room, Clara was feeding Jason red wine mouth to mouth when someone burst in, startling her, and she screamed, "What are you doing?" Jason wasn't much better off. He had drunk a lot in front of Clara's room. Half drunk and feeling weak all over, he slammed the table and shouted, "Are you all planning to rebel?" Ivy walked in and looked at them. "Honey, today is our wedding night." Clara said her stomach hurts to coax you here. "I had someone prepare some medicine. Come here. Let Clara drink it." Clara stepped back. "What medicine?" "I won't drink it." Ivy came prepared. "She has to drink." Several bodyguards rushed forward to hold Clara down and poured a bowl of medicine directly into her mouth, leaving not a single drop. "Then cover her mouth and make her swallow all the medicine." Jason had never seen such a scene before, and he roared, "Ivy, what are you trying to do?" Ivy looked at him. You married me, yet behind my back, you keep this slut at home. Do you really think I'm easy to bully? This medication is specifically prescribed for her by me. You don't want to have children with me, yet you want to marry me. What do you think you are? I might as well tell you today, either get a divorce now, or she will never be able to have children in this lifetime. Ivy looked at Clara as if she were a corpse. Clara, you're too greedy? What you just drank is a potion that will make it impossible for you to have children in the future. This is my warning to you. You, a little mistress, what do you count for? How dare you compete with me? Jason was both shocked and angry. Clara wanted to spit out the medicine, but she had been pressed tightly by the bodyguard just now, and she had swallowed it all, unable to vomit it back up. Ivy wasn't afraid of how Jason felt about her. Now the Lincoln family's reputation was in tatters. Even if they had just gotten their marriage certificate and then divorced, it wouldn't affect her family's stocks. She turned around and left the small courtyard, returning to her villa. The struggle had only just begun. The next day, the Lincoln family called an ambulance early in the morning to take Clara to the hospital. It turned out that Clara had just had a miscarriage, and the dosage of medicine YV administered was far too high, causing Clara, whose body had not yet recovered, to bleed heavily. She was taken to the hospital and went straight into the emergency room. Jason slept in her room, but because he was drunk, he remained in a stupor. When he woke up in the morning, he found himself lying in a pool of blood, with Clara covered in blood beneath him. He was shocked to the core and still hadn't come to his senses. The nanny went to find Jason's mother, but unexpectedly, after their wedding, Jason's mother took a flight abroad, leaving a letter stating that she would settle down overseas and would not return to the Lincoln family, and that there was no need to look for her anymore. When the police arrived, Jason was the first suspect, and Ivy was also involved. The two were caught up in a murder case, and for a time, the stocks of the Lincoln and Lee families were in turmoil. However, the Lee family had a reliable leader, who was now focused on how to get Ivy out of this situation. The Lincoln family, on the other hand, was not so certain. The Lincoln Group immediately convened a board meeting, directly sidelining Jason and appointing a new chairman. Jason's status plummeted, never to return to its former glory. After Clara left the hospital, although she was fine, she would have to spend the rest of her life in a nursing home. How could she be willing to accept this? She directly had someone trick Jason and dragged him to leap from the 30th floor. When the social media platform was causing a stir in the city, I happened to be on a plane heading abroad to pursue my doctorate. When Sarah came to see me off, she sighed a few times. Who would have thought that a betrothal arranged since childhood would end up like this?